Skarloey is the oldest engine on the Skarloey Railway, and is loved by many people, young and old. He and along with his coaches are friendly to everyone they meet. While they may be old, but they love their times and they're friendly to everyone they meet. The coaches get along with the passengers very well, but if the coaches misbehave, Skarloey would always put them in place. His coaches are very reliable too, and they get along with every engine on the railway. And sometimes, like Skarloey, they will put the engine who is misbehaving in their place and make them see sense. Unfortunately, like Skarloey, the coaches are old, and they're not as young as what they used to be. One day, Skarloey's coaches were being examined by workmen. The workmen examined all over. "We've got some bad news, Skarloey. Your coaches are now suffering from seats are starting to get holes in them. Their paint is starting to deteriorate, and rust is starting to show them." "Oh dear," said Skarloey. "How long? What shall we do?" "Don't worry, Skarloey. They'll be taken away to the works for an overhaul. We don't know how long they will take, but it will take a long time." "Oh, I hope they get back soon," said Skarloey. The coaches were lifted onto a flatbed, and Donald arrived to take the coaches away. "Be back soon, my friends," said Skarloey. "Oh, don't worry, Skarloey. We will. But we don't know how long it will be." Just then, Mr. Percival came up. "Skarloey, I can see you're missing your coaches have been taken away to the works for a huge overhaul. I have loaned some coaches from the Irish Railway for temporary use. Could you please go pick them up?" "Sure thing," said Skarloey. He set off to see the new coaches. At last, he made it to the shed where the temporary coaches were. The temporary coaches looked smart, and inside them looked very luxurious. "Hello," said Skarloey. "I'm Skarloey, and you are my temporary coaches, right?"
Said the coaches. "So you're the famous Skarloey. We were expecting someone's reputation to be a little bit more younger."
Skarloey was confused by this, but didn't take any notice. Skarloey covered himself up to the temporary coaches, and off they went. The journey went well until the coaches started snickering and being uppity.
"This engine is way too slow and old. Why is he in service?"
"Sheesh, there's no need for that behaviour," said Skarloey. "I may be old, but my time is not over yet."
"You are too slow. That's your problem.
Skarloey decided.
Can you go a little bit faster?"
So Skarloey did. Unfortunately, when they reached corners,
"Eek!"
they cried.
"Oh, what was that?"
"It's these damn temporary coaches," said his driver. "These coaches were not made for type-bins. They were just meant for bigger and longer railways."
"Oh, you're telling me that?"
The journey became harder and harder for Skarloey. At last he arrived at the first station. Duke was there, taking some ballast trucks from the slate quarry to the transfer yard.
"Hello, Skarloey. Oh, you seem a bit tired. Have you not gotten any rest lately?" "It's not that, Duke. I'm just getting used to these coaches."
This old engine is too... When he runs fast, he runs out of breath too quickly. You ask me, he should be retired and be reserved before it's too late."
The days passed, and Skarloey was becoming more slower and exhausted from the coaches. The next morning, Skarloey woke up feeling exhausted from the coaches. Mr. Bull came up. He looked worried to seeing Skarloey tired out. Skarloey, I'm decided I'll give you a rest. You looked very tired and haven't looked like you hadn't got any sleep.
And also, these coaches are really hard work. They've been telling me to go faster. I can't seem to be up to standards.
Don't worry, Skarloey. Duncan will take over your duties. Although I'm not sure how Duncan will deal with these coaches.
Oh, that's what I'm afraid of, sir, said Skarloey.
So Duncan took over, pulling Skarloey's coaches. However, temporarily coaches, but unlike Skarloey, he was easily irritated.
Hush! No one cares about your problems! How dare you speak to a lady like that? You disgusting, filthy yellow squid!
The journey got worse and worse. Whenever Duncan stopped at the station, he would often brake very hardly to biff the coaches back into the back of his buffers. And whenever he was coming up to them, he would biff them angrily. The journey didn't get better either. Duncan began to go faster and faster just to teach the coaches a lesson about speed limits on the railway. Unfortunately, Duncan and the coaches were being careless. There were point siding being switched to a different line. Unfortunately, the signalman saw Duncan coming up ahead. He tried to change the points. Unfortunately, the gears for the points had failed. Duncan's driver tried to put on the brakes, but it was too late.
You bastards! Look what you've done! What we did? You did this, you complete buffoon!
The three scrabbled and yapped like chihuahuas until Rusty arrived with the works train. At last, Duncan, who was loaded onto a flatbed by the works train, and the coaches were put back onto the rails, and then Rusty took Duncan and the coaches away back to the yards. That evening at the shed, Mr. Percival had severe words to Duncan.
Duncan! What on earth did I think you're doing? Travelling at 95 kilometres on a 50-kilometre railway? This was really dangerous. You could have put a lot of passengers and your crew badly injured.
I know, sir. I'm sorry, sir. It's just that those coaches are extremely vulgar.
Yes, I know that, Duncan. So I'll be having them sent back to their railway straight away. But you've got to be more controlled with your anger, Duncan. It just makes you just as bad as those coaches.
Duncan looked very ashamed and embarrassed about today. He then looked at Skarloey, and Skarloey looked at him.
How did I do that, Skarloey? Do what? Those evil-lettered coaches. How do you put up with those hoochies?
Oh, I just ignore them and pretend they're not there. You'll find there's a lot of stupid people and engines and rolling stock around in the world. If you'll just ignore them, and move on with your life, they'll just make them look more like a fool than they are. But if you react back, that makes you just as bad as them and makes you the bigger idiot. Suddenly, Freddy with a bunch of coaches arrived. Skarloey recognized coaches.
My coaches are back! I believe these belong to you, said Freddy.
Hello, Skarloey, said the coaches. We missed you.
Mr. Possible, you brought them back?
The workman was able to fix them in time. They had all the parts in storage at the works. And Skarloey, you will no longer have to deal with snooty coaches anymore.
Skarloey was delighted at this, and from that day on, Skarloey and the coaches still remain in this service to this day. Skarloey would never replace his own coaches for anything else.
as they are not replaceable. No, as his coaches are his coaches in his eyes and heart.